All right. I feel the energy. You know, it's either excitement or nervousness. Which one is it? Both? Yeah, yeah. Well, I get asked all the time about public speaking and why are you so comfortable with public speaking? And I know it would really shock you to tell you that public speaking still makes me nervous. Y'all don't believe that. But the thing about this event is it really is an opportunity for us to get a chance to see and hear the talent that our students possess. And I must tell you, every time that we have done this, and I've been here in the Institute for quite a while, about 20, almost 20 years now, and I'm still amazed at how talented our students are when it comes to the oratory contest. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you all. Uh, Thank you for signing up to be a speaker. I know it's not easy. Public speaking is not easy, and so you all showing great courage just and taking this on. We'll be rooting for you, right? Those of us here in the audience, there's no booing, all right? No booing. Don't boo. All right. Just cheer and support. And I'm glad that you all are here to support our candidates. So I want to thank our judges who are here. Let's give them a round of applause. Although some of y'all might not be cheering them at the end of the day. What? What are y'all? No, no, we appreciate their time and their effort. And so I'm sorry, Denise. Do we have an MC or Jayla, thank you. I'm sorry, Jayla. I apologize. I've been all over the place, so I apologize. Wonderful. So without further ado, you want to come up, get us started? All right, let's get going. Let's get to it.
Hmm. Hello, everyone. As Dr. O'Brien mentioned, my name is Jayla Eaton, and I'm excited to be your host for tonight's Roland E. Latham oratory competition. I'm even more excited for all the students who are making their voices heard this evening. To those who are tuning in online, thank you for coming and showing support. Tonight's contestants will be technically judged on content, delivery, presentation, eye contact, and being within the time limit on a 1 to 10 scoring scale. We will have a first, second, and third place winner who will receive a $1,000, $500, and $250 cash prize, respectively. In the case of a tie, the judges will deliberate. However, I stress that there are only 3 award recipients. At the end of the night is also a People's Choice Award where you, the audience, get to decide on the best speech heard here tonight. Guiding our competition this evening, we are honored to have 3 distinguished judges, all who serve as influential members of the Northeastern community. First is Sarah Rivera, serving as the director of the Latinx Student Cultural Center, chair of the LACLA Scholarship, and advisor for Lasso and the Caliente Dance Group. Sarah has met and supported thousands of students and their families, as well as has been involved with various campus partners, including, but not limited to, the African American Institute, the LGBTQIA+ Resource Center, and Empower. As a first-generation Puerto Rican, she earned her master's degree in 2013 and hopes her journey can inspire other first-gen students to pursue an advanced career. Next, we have Richard Harris. Prior to joining Northeastern University in 2003, Dean Richard spent 15 plus years in industry as an industrial engineer and manager at Microwave Associates Company Incorporated and Mitsubishi Chemical America Incorporated. He currently holds the following positions: College of Engineer Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Director of NU Prime, which is Northeastern University's program in multicultural engineering, Affiliate Professor of Africana Studies in the College of Social Sciences and Humanities, and serves on the Northeastern University Presidential Council on Diversity and Inclusion. Lastly, we have Jennifer Barrymore. Jennifer serves as Northeastern University's Vice President of Advancement, Resources, and Campaign Operations, supporting the $1.3 billion Experience campaign. She is also the founder of the university's Village of Belonging, an initiative created to engage alums representing diverse communities. Before joining Northeastern, she worked with Morehouse College as AVP of Advancement Operations and Administrative Services. In her 2 years at Morehouse College, fundraising revenue increased from $13 million to $107 million in 2020. During Michigan State's University's $1.5 billion Empower Capital campaign, she served as Senior Director of Prospect Development and Donor Strategy. Under her supervision, the pipeline produced a 35% increase in donations within 2 years. Having received her executive MBA from Michigan State University and her BS in marketing from DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois, she enjoys engrossing herself in the world of literature and takes great pleasure in visiting historic locations worldwide. So let's give a round of applause for our judges. Before we start the competition, we kindly ask everyone to please silence their devices to minimize distractions. We also encourage attendees to exit the room only between speeches to maintain the flow of the event and not disturb our participants. For those joining us online, please feel free to use the chat feature to engage. Restrooms are located towards the right back hallway. If you have any questions or require assistance throughout the event, our staff members are readily available to help you. Thank you for joining us, and let's make tonight a memorable occasion. And so our first contestant is Sebastian Caycedo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sebastian Caicedo, and today I'll be talking about the prompt, Borders, Migration, and Humanity. Over generations, people have shaped what migration looks like and how we respond to migrants. This has had implications for national security regarding who is deemed worthy of migration. However, a real dilemma lies not in whether a country is safe from migrants, but rather how migrants are perceived and whether they are afforded the dignity that all people deserve. A foundational idea shaping how migration looks is the concept of borders. Nations have traditionally used borders to establish sovereignty. However, borders are also a social construct, often racialized and weaponized in pursuit of power and control. To demonstrate this, let's look back at the Mexico-US War. As noted by historians, Mexico ceded roughly half of its land to the US at the end of the war, and the US adopted a new border. But this land was not uninhabited. It was home to Mexicans who built communities there over centuries. Mexican residents caught in the crosshairs of this shift were given an ultimatum: become US citizens or forcibly go to Mexico. For those who remained, they lost access to their land and wealth, facing barriers driven by structural racism. This situation spurred Mexican-American activists' use of the phrase, "We did not cross the border crossed us." It reveals how borders can facilitate assimilation and displacement. With borders as a social construct in mind, we should also critically examine how migration is framed. First, take forced migration. While the experiences surrounding forced migration are complex, reductionist rhetoric often takes precedent. Migrants are perceived as taking resources, posing criminal threats, and disrupting sovereignty. What is disregarded is the fact that these migrants are often fleeing from dangerous humanitarian crises, seeking safety themselves. Immigrant becomes a political identification, denying the personhood of migrants through false narratives. Now, compare this to voluntary migration. Many students on this campus traveled abroad for spring break without issues. In some cases, voluntary migration is encouraged, regardless of a migrant's intention. Why is it that people who engage in voluntary migration are not automatically seen as a threat to national security? Voluntary migration is more socially acceptable, whereas forced migration is a danger, indicating a harmful disparity in thinking affecting forced migrants' access to safety. Diving deeper into forced migration, the United Nations notes that 123.2 million people were forcibly displaced globally by 2025. That number is expected to grow as countries increasingly navigate war, political turmoil, violence, and human rights violations. In response, international legal mechanisms, such as the 1951 Refugee Convention, are meant to protect migrants' right to safety. However, migrants must prove fear of persecution when seeking asylum, which is often not easy or feasible. Additionally, many countries have or are introducing structural barriers to avert immigration, such as deportation and strict documentation requirements, which leaves many migrants without options. In general, anti-immigration sentiment and actions are often adopted because they feel the most accessible to those in stable positions. They push responsibility onto migrants and offer quick fixes rather than viable long-term solutions. Exclusionary policies and practices are ultimately choices that do not have to be the norm. With forced displacement expected to increase, we must take global action to prioritize dignity and honor our shared humanity to protect migrants in need. To do this, what if we reshaped borders as areas of support rather than areas that dismiss migrants? This does not require a complete abandonment of security standards, but rather remobilizing our resources in ways that acknowledge and address the difficult circumstances migrants face. This can take the form of investing in robust asylum infrastructure, providing medical and legal aid, or issuing humanitarian visas. Fostering this change will require global commitment and the establishment of shared responsibility through international doctrine. While this is unlikely to occur in the near future, we can start by interrogating our distorted views around migration, recognizing the basic needs of migrants, and providing the respect and decency everyone should receive in the present. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Good job. And next, I would like to introduce Hannah Abubakari.
Not too long ago, 4 students walked into a store, sat down at a lunch counter, and asked to be served. They were told to leave. They stayed. Hours passed, people stared. Some laughed, others threatened. Coffee was poured on them. Words were thrown harder than fists, and still they didn't move. Because in that moment, sitting quietly had become one of the most disruptive things that one could do. Not because it was easy, but because it wasn't. We like to remember the civil rights movement as a story that makes us feel proud. A few leaders, peaceful marches, a country that slowly did the right thing inevitably. And it's a good story. I believed it myself for a while. But if you come to learn, it's not the whole story. Because the real movement wasn't comfortable, and it definitely was not simple. It was full of tension. People didn't always agree on what freedom was going to look like or how to get there. Some believed in working within the system. Others believed that a full reconstruction was necessary in order to see true progress. These weren't just small disagreements, but they were fundamental. And yet, that friction did not break the movement. It pushed it forward, and it made it stronger. Additionally, it wasn't safe. We talk about courage, but we rarely sit with what that actually means. Students are facing mobs sitting at lunch counters. Families are risking their livelihoods just to be able to have the right to vote. People are stepping into the streets, knowing that they could be arrested, beaten, or worse. They didn't act because change was going to be guaranteed if they went outside. They acted because they knew it wasn't. And then there's the part we all like to forget, the disruption. Because today we tend to believe that the quote unquote right kind of protest is the quiet ones, the convenient ones, the respectful ones, the ones that are easy to ignore. But the civil rights movement was none of these things. It interrupted daily life, and it created pressure, and it forced people to pay attention even when they did not want to. It forced us to look at ourselves and realize that there was a flaw in what we were doing. But over time, unfortunately, we've softened that reality. We've turned a movement that challenged the nation into a story that comforts it. And that changes how we respond to movements today. Because now, when people raise their voices, when they disrupt, and when they demand, we ask, why can't they do it the right way? But history already has an answer for that. The people we celebrate now were once told the same thing, that they were too loud, that they were too radical, and that they were too much. Speaking from personal experience as a Black woman who's involved in STEM and on this campus and just in life in general, I've personally been told many times before that I was too aggressive, that I spoke out too much, that I was too loud, simply because I dared to have an opinion, I dared to believe, and I dared to judge and advocate. So it's a tale as old as time. So if we know this, maybe the issue isn't that activism today has lost its way. Maybe instead, it's that we've forgotten what change has always required. Because progress has never been inevitable. It has always been contested. It has always been pushed forward by people willing to create tension, to take risk, and to keep going, even when they knew they were going to be misunderstood. So when we strip that truth from our history, we don't just lose accuracy, we lose our very sense of responsibility. Because it's easy to admire courage in hindsight from a distance, but it's harder to recognize it when it's in the present, and harder still to take part in it. So the question isn't whether we respect the civil rights movement. The question is whether we understand it well enough to live up to it. Because if we only support justice when it feels comfortable, then we're not really supporting change. We're just celebrating it after it has already happened. And history makes one thing clear. Real change has never been comfortable. And I'm sorry to disappoint, not really, because it is a character development journey that we all need to go on, but it's not going to change. Because the legacy of that movement isn't just something to remember, it is something to continue to be strengthened and empowered by. And that doesn't happen when we wait for change to feel comfortable or convenient. It happens when we decide that justice matters more than comfort, and we start to act like it. So the question I then have for all of you is just this. When this moment becomes history, what side of it are you going to be on? As the late Reverend Jesse Jackson said, I am somebody, Hannah Abubakari, and I'm here to tell you today that you are too, so let's do something about it. Thank you.
Okay, I see y'all. And next, I would like to introduce Aliana Bailey, please.
The civil rights movement is marketed as the end-all be-all. But let's think for a moment. Do we have civil rights? The first thing that comes to mind when thinking about civil rights is Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Specifically, the optimistic part where he romanticizes a future of equality, one that we still have not yet had the pleasure of bearing witness to. We remember the end of that speech, but we refuse or we choose not to remember the beginning of it. He expresses frustration with the economic and socio-political disenfranchisement of Black people. Every 100 years, it seems we take a step forward towards progress, but the result still remains disheartening. In the 60s, institutionalization used as a weapon against African Americans took place in many forms. If you so much as questioned or expressed any amount of disdain for this country's undeniably inequitable system, then you were not only jailed, but you were sentenced to psychiatric confinement. Jonathan M. Metzel's Protest Psychosis, How Schizophrenia Became a Black Disorder, describes how in Iona State Hospital, it was predominantly populated by Black men, punished for rejecting racial injustice. Schizophrenia became linked with Blackness. Today, Black men are still disproportionately affected by diagnoses of schizophrenia. The systems that punish Black people for demanding their humanity during the civil rights movement have not disappeared. The legacy of punishment and isolation of especially Black men is a direct reflection of the cost of civil rights. Furthermore, according to mappingpoliceviolence.org, Black people are 2.8 times more likely to be murdered by police than white people. In just the 3 short months since 2026 began, 46 Black people have been murdered by law enforcement. As Adia Harvey Wingfield writes in the American Sociological Association, though it has been more than 60 years since the Civil Rights Act has been passed, Black people still remain less likely to receive interviews, and there are still significant pay disparities that affect Black women especially. Black bodies are overworked and underpaid. We are still being institutionalized, killed, and economically disenfranchised. Textbooks make it seem like after the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964, all of our struggles ended with it. But the reality is, we are still fighting for our lives, for the same things our predecessors did. The only difference is that because we have seen progress in the form of voting acts, regs, and fair housing laws, we're under the illusion that we're almost at the finish line. The reality is there is no finish line. Until Black people can successfully provide for ourselves, invest in our own communities in a way that has no relation to forcing ourselves into the white man's world, then we will never, ever be done fighting. I fear I have integrated my people into a burning house. Even King himself had doubts about whether we really won anything from civil rights. Systemic racism thrives on misinformation. If we get to learn the truth about our history, then we're likely to organize and combat it in a way that challenges the very same system meant to confine us as slaves. Sanitizing history is an attempt to pacify us. They want to tell us what to think so it affects how we feel and how we act. But learning the raw, uncut pieces of hidden history is the key to making great change. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, I would like to introduce Brian Colson. Sorry, going to take a real quick second. But Brian, you can come up here and get ready if you would like.
Hello, everyone. Neutrality is harmful, it is dangerous, and it is an active choice. And when injustice is happening, choosing not to act doesn't stop harm, it protects it. So, my thesis is simple. In times of injustice, neutrality is not fairness, it is complicity. I learned this long before I had the words for it. I've spent much of my life inside institutions, schools, hospitals, treatment centers, housing systems. I now work in healthcare, and what I've learned is that harm rarely shows up loudly, it shows up quietly. In paperwork delays, and unchallenged policies, and ignored complaints, and people saying, that's just how things work. That sentence, that's just how things work, that is neutrality. In healthcare, neutrality looks like watching a patient get brushed off because of race, income, or mental health history, and choosing silence. But people still suffer. As Angela Davis reminds us, in a racist society, it is not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. Silence is not neutrality. Silence protects injustice. Most injustice thrives because people get used to it. And sometimes silence feels justified, like someone else will step in. Research on bystander behavior confirms this. When responsibility feels shared, people are far less likely to intervene. Everybody stands by, and nobody moves. That's neutrality in action. It happens in classrooms, institutions, and even online, where we scroll past suffering because it feels uncomfortable. We tell ourselves we're being neutral, but neutrality always supports power. And the same question applies to nations. When countries claim neutrality while injustice continues, does their silence preserve peace or power? Here's where this gets personal. I've spent a lot of time being told to stay strong instead of being asked what I need. I've been called resilient instead of being supported. As a student of color, I felt the pressure to be exceptional just to be seen as capable, carrying ambition and exhaustion at the same time. I've watched systems label people as difficult instead of being asked what they actually need. And every time someone chose not to challenge that, they became part of it. Neutrality doesn't require cruelty, it only requires inaction. So, when does inaction become complicated? When we protect institutions instead of human beings. When we confuse professionalism with silence. Progress has never emerged from balance. It emerges from disruption. The civil rights movement did not succeed because people stayed comfortable. It succeeded because ordinary people took risks, organizing, resisting, making injustice visible. Justice has always required participation. So what does responsibility look like? It means asking better questions, speaking up when something feels wrong, noticing whose voices are missing, and understanding that being uncomfortable is not the same as being in danger. For institutions, match your actions to your mission statements. For individuals, remember that silence is still a decision. And for me, as someone inside healthcare, it means refusing to be the kind of professional who sees harm and stays silent. Because every system is made of humans, and injustice survives because enough people allow it. I'll repeat myself. Neutrality is dangerous, yet neutrality is the easy road. Justice demands more. The next time something feels wrong, what will you do? Thank you.
Great job, everyone who's gone so far. And the next person that I would like to introduce is Josihana Colon.
Good afternoon. Okay, I can start. Okay. I asked this question today. How often do you feel as though policies are more symbolic, reactive than intentional? My favorite saying is that talk is cheap. Evaluating the 2016 Student Opportunity and Achievement Gap requires more than simply acknowledging the structures we have already in place. The policy recognizes and acknowledges the gap with a commitment to a 6-year reevaluation of the policy itself. While programs have been established and advisory councils have convened, these efforts alone do not fully capture the depth of an institution's commitment. The true evaluation demands a cross-model application, one that examines how policies, practices, and outcomes intersect across systems and over time. It calls for moving beyond symbolic gestures and toward intentional, data-informed policymaking grounded in the results of existing initiatives. At the center of this evaluation, it is critical to ask who is in the room, and just as importantly, who is not. The presence or absence of voices, particularly those most impacted by opportunity achievement gaps, shapes not only the policies that are created, but also their effectiveness and what the outcomes look like. Understanding representation, participation, and influence is essential to assessing whether institutional efforts are truly equitable or merely performative. As I mentioned, my favorite quote is "Talk is cheap and silence is complacency." When I think about this, I think about my time in the Boston Student Advisory Council. During that time, I spoke against countless of other stakeholders surrounding the opportunity achievement gap and what that looked like at New Mission High School. Today, I am now a staff member in the same advisory program. We see the student opportunity achievement policy still being enacted today, but the issue is we are still seeing the same outcomes. There are low graduation rates. Seniors are at risk of graduating. There is, yes, possibly high enrollment into college, but there's also a high rate of students dropping out of their first year of college due to the existing opportunity achievement gap that has created structural barriers for them. When I think about the Boston Student Advisory Council, I think about the student representatives that show up into the Bowling building and they talk about how it truly impacts their high school experience. Yet, when it comes down to the stakeholders that are present in those meetings, they are absent. When I think about policies and when I think about transparency and accountability and what that exactly looks like when it comes to whether or not it is truly commitment, I think about how we have various initiatives that surround our campuses, and again, the outcomes speak for themselves. When we think about cross-model application and processes, what I mean by that is, for example, looking at our neighbors, looking at what other schools are doing to, whether that be to acknowledge what the structural barrier is or acknowledge where we are lacking, I believe that cross-model application will truly show the commitment. When we think about performative allyship, usually that just means just posting something on their story or again, just making a policy and assuming that the work is then done. What really shows the effectiveness of a policy is its outcomes. And so again, when I talk about the difference between allyship and sustained action, it is the outcomes. When we look at outcomes, when we look at what the rates truly are, and when we actually evaluate how students are impacted by the policies that are created, when we look at how students are still marginalized, still oppressed, how they are unable to access institutions like Northeastern University, that is how you know whether or not there is a commitment. When I look at this institution, I think about how Boston Public Schools is literally a pipeline, except most of us are not in the building. Most of us are not in our classrooms. I believe that a policy in itself, when it comes to the opportunity achievement gap, would address that. You would start seeing more students coming from Boston Public Schools to more prestigious colleges and universities. And I believe that is how you start to see the impact. We see career pathways being incorporated into pilot schools, but you don't see it in traditional schools. You see the inequity. You see that there's a disproportionate effectiveness of policy when you see that a Boston Latin school coming from an exam school has over 20 different extracurricular programs, except you go to the school next door, whether that be the Madison Park High School, and we see right there the lack of infrastructure of supports and structure. That is how you know that there is a lack of commitment and effectiveness to policies. When there are schools all around the country that are varying in outcomes, that is how you know that a policy is not truly committed to the students that they attempt to serve. So as I conclude, when I talk about performative allyship and sustained action, I think about what are the outcomes? What does the data say? And how can we reapply this to other systems? And how can we adapt those to those particular populations? Thank you.
Well, thank you. So far, all these speeches have really made me think about a lot of things, and I appreciate everyone who has gone so far. And next, I would like to introduce Felicia Diaz.
Now, could you please raise your hand if you've seen a Tyler Perry movie? A lot, right. Now, could you raise your hand if you knew that the first paramedic of modern ambulances and EMS were created by a group of Black people? Ooh, not as many. Now, I personally hear and see ambulances on a daily basis, but Medea, maybe once a month? It's funny how mainstream knowledge about Blackness has often been through modern day minstrelsy, pushing stereotypes in that normalized racist rhetoric. But when it comes to empowering stories of Black knowledge, innovation, wealth, and brilliance in American history, those pieces are considered underground. There's a reason why Trump's executive orders to ban programs and restrict DEI terminology, lest I say the words out loud, he revoked my underground knowledge or my degree, but I say diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility are considered a threat to preserving the myths of white patriarchal America. Now, I believe students have a responsibility to be both learners and historians of the legacy of Black voices and progress. And I believe education can reframe how history is understood, creating the critical skepticism that breeds both knowledge of self and community-based self-learning. So what's history? It's the study, interpretation, and documentation of human events based on evidence, and some argue it's an incomplete view of the past, likely biased, which I completely agree. Humans are storytellers, so as students, it's crucial we tell the stories of our elders, of those who detest us, of those who are in solidarity with us. Selective history has always been an issue, so what's different now? Before there were textbooks, there was oral history. Before there were archives, there were elders. Black communities have always preserved truths through stories, passed down at dinner tables, front porches, and in rooms just like this one. That tradition isn't primitive. It's powerful, and it's ours. So we, as students, are both products of the educational system and witnesses to its gaps. That dual position gives us a credibility no half-written history book can ever replicate. And when a student says, I'm the only Black person in this classroom, and I felt invisible, discouraged, and distracted, that's not just testimony, that's evidence to the psychology of belonging. Selective history is a consistent wound across generations, but as Audre Lorde reminds us, it is better to speak remembering we were never meant to survive. Silence is a choice, but so is speaking. And what differentiates us from our ancestors in this fight of erasure is that we have access to more resources, more platforms, more archives, more of each other. Communicating our existence is resistance, and through knowledge and oral history makes every student in this room a historian simultaneously. There's a term called symbolic annihilation, which describes the erasure, trivialization, and condemnation of marginalized groups through media. And one of the strongest tools of opposing what reinforces social inequality and invisibility is knowledge, the one thing you can't be forcibly stripped of. That's why knowledge of self matters so much. It's a pillar rooted in hip hop history and culture traced back to the Nation of Islam. It emphasizes awareness of one's identity, history, and the injustices woven into it, urging personal and social transformation through self-knowledge. Now, when education teaches us whose perspective is missing here, that question doesn't just stay in the classroom, it becomes a lifelong habit of critical skepticism and thinking that strengthens everything we touch. Now, this semester, I got a complete breakdown of structural racism through my Africana Studies class. And the person who taught me this, his name was Fu Kwan, a man who was wrongfully convicted for 28 years in prison, who just got released in October. Society told me to discard him, detest, ignore him, because he was incarcerated. Yet his knowledge passed orally challenged the history. It closed the gap and helped me understand the past. That kind of erasure that the Department of Africana Studies just lost 80% of their funding is what amplifies historical silence. Now, erasure doesn't just happen overnight, and neither will the reclaiming. History is actively being rewritten, but every student in this room who chooses to learn and to question and to teach is a direct opponent to that rewriting. So, what's my name? Felicia A. Mendias. And my middle name means let it be. So, students as agents of change, let it be. Solidarity, let it be. Critical skepticism, let it be. Experiencing and witnessing the power of Black history, let it be. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. Our next speaker was supposed to be Mishka Francis, but unfortunately they are not here. So our next speaker will be Mackenzie Gale.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mackenzie Gale, and today I will be discussing historical erasure. When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him not to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place and he will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. His education makes it necessary. That was 1933, and yet Woodson had observed the behavior that classrooms were quietly doing every single day. The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson explores his thesis that African Americans were being culturally indoctrinated rather than taught in American schools. The miseducation bred generations of voluntary subordinates, like a label on clothing, no coercion necessary. Woodson argued that the curriculum in formal schools perpetuated miseducation by largely excluding African American history and achievements while emphasizing European narratives that reinforced white supremacy. For example, textbooks depict Black people primarily in subservient roles and omit key figures and contributions. West African iron smelting began before 1000 BCE, coinciding with the development of iron smelting in Western Europe. This directly counters the narrative that Africa was technologically behind Europe. In fact, African smelters were imaginative in furnace design and inventive in their use of ores, surpassing that of European nations. If you distort a people's history, you will eventually distort a people's future. I want you to sit with that for a moment. What does that feel like? What comes up when you hear those words? If that did not move you, consider this. Woodson called it subordination without coercion. A society thoroughly controlled by white supremacists in which people enforce their own oppression willingly without being asked. What responsibility do we have in redefining the systems that have historically silenced and continue to erase the accomplishments and experiences of African Americans? Imagine someone erases you, not your body, your ancestry, your religion, your language, your values, that you were here, that you built something, that you mattered. That is what historical erasure looks like. And as students, we sit at the intersection of subordination and freedom. Which will you choose? First, we go to our elders, not text them, not scroll past their stories, sit with them, break bread face to face. They are the archive made flesh, people who lived through, witnessed, and participated in chapters of Black history that no textbook ever included. Second, look around you. Every single day, colleges and universities across this country are filled by scholars of excellence, Black students who are brilliant, driven, and capable of changing the world. And yet, institutions consistently overlook them. It is up to us as students here to not overlook our peers, but to encourage them, to invite them in, to introduce them to like-minded people in a position to uplift. But I have to ask, why is it always a fight? We fought for our right to an education, for the right to work, and we continue to fight to have a seat at the table with lawmakers and board members, fighting to have a hand in writing the laws that govern our own lives. We cannot stand idly by and wait for institutions to enact change that Black excellence deserves. We must demand it.
They never told you that 20,000 years ago in present-day Congo, Africans were calculating prime numbers and mapping lunar cycles centuries before Europe had a written language. They never told you that enslaved hands built the economy of a nation that refused to write their names in its history books. They never told you about Lewis Latimer, whose carbon filament made the light bulb last while Thomas Edison took credit. They never told you about Dr. Gladys West, the Black woman whose mathematical genius built the model of the Earth that made GPS possible. They never told you because if they had, you would have known exactly who you are. Woodson warned us that controlled thinking produces controlled people, but the inverse is also true. A people who know their history cannot be so easily miseducated. As students, the research and preservation of historical figures who have been erased from our education is a legacy we can leave behind. So share it relentlessly, out loud. Talk endlessly about Claudette Colvin, who pioneered bus desegregation before Rosa Parks. Talk about Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler, the first Black woman physician. Talk about Elizabeth Freeman, a woman who was enslaved, filed a legal challenge citing the Constitution's promise of liberty, and won her freedom right here in court in Massachusetts. These names are the archive, and every time you say them out loud, you are doing what Woodson begged of us. You are refusing to let erasure be the final word. We did not choose to have our history taken, but we choose whether it stays gone. Inherit the silence or become the archive. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, I would like to introduce Arsema Gabriasis.
My name is Arsema Gabriasis. I study cybersecurity and criminal justice, and those two fields taught me everything I need to know about who technology serves and who it does not. There are hiring tools that show significant discrimination against African Americans. The Bureau of Economic Research states that traditionally white names receive 50% more callbacks than traditional Black names. There's yet another system making life-altering decisions about people who look like me, and nobody who looks like me helped build it. I watched algorithms in sentencing and policing consistently produce harsher outcomes for Black and brown people. And I had to ask, who was in this room when they built these things? Because I'll tell you who it wasn't. It wasn't us. And this isn't just a tech problem. It's touching every field we're studying in this room. If you're in medicine, hospitals used an algorithm that gave Black patients lower risk scores than white patients with the same condition, because it measured spending, not need. If you're in law, predictive policing tools are built on decades of over-policing Black neighborhoods. The algorithm didn't predict crime, it reproduced bias. If you're in education, AI proctoring software during COVID flagged Black and brown students for cheating because the system couldn't detect their dark skins. If you're in business, lending algorithms charge Black and Latino borrowers higher interest rates than white borrowers with identical credit profiles. Redlining didn't disappear. It got an upgrade. And here's the truth that keeps me up at night. The communities most affected by technology are the least included in creating it. They're too focused on survival. When a young man is navigating a system designed to criminalize him, he's not thinking about machine learning. This is not a personal failure. This is a systematic one. So what can you do today? Educate yourself on policies being written that affect people who look like us. If you're technical, learn how bias auditing works. If you're not, we need you as advocates. Talk to your family, talk to your community. But let me be honest, individual alone won't fix a systemic problem. We need legislation that mandates bias auditing before algorithm touch sentencing, loans, or medical diagnosis. We need diverse representation on communities writing the rules. And I'll be the first to say, that's part of the solution, not all of it. Funding can be cut, policy can be rolled back. The only thing that can't be taken away is what we build ourselves and what we teach each other. So we push for systemic change and we build our own infrastructure. J. Cole said it plainly in Change. The only real change can happen from the inside. That line hits differently in this room because we are the inside. We loved in these communities, lived in these communities, and now we're being educated and positioned to lead. The digital divide is a civil rights issue. The saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. Every class we take, every degree we earn gives us that power. We have a responsibility that goes beyond the numbers on our paychecks to ask the questions in the room no one else will ask. Who bears the moral responsibility if this goes wrong? Black communities have never lacked genius. We built the Harlem Renaissance. We built Black Wall Street and Tulsa, a community so wealthy, so self-sufficient, so powerful, they burned it down. Not because we were failing, but because we were thriving. We produced leaders, they took them. Dr. King, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton. Every time a voice rose powerful enough to threaten the system, it was silenced. They burned our cities. They assassinated our leaders. They buried our history. And yet, here we are, still rising, still building. Carter G. Woodson wrote, if the highly educated Negro would fall in love with his own people and begin to sacrifice for their uplift, he would solve some of the problem now confronting the race. That sacrifice he's talking about, that's us. Not someday. We work hard now so we can build the community tech programs, build companies that look like us, think like us, and build for us. We can sit at the table, and if they won't give us a seat, we do what we've always done. We build our own. The question is no longer whether AI will shape the future. It will. The question is now, will we be again the subjects of someone else's system or the architectures of our own? I know my answer, and if you're in this room, you know yours too. Now let's go build something. Thank you.
Thank you, Arsema. The next person I would like to introduce is Darina Guy Williams.
Good evening, judges, my fellow contestants, family, friends, and the Northeastern community. Nigerian novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie once described the critical misunderstandings that result from what she calls the danger of a single story. In it, she shares personal accounts of the ways we reduce people, ideas, and perspectives to one story, letting it be the sole definition. She tells listeners that power is the ability not to just tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. She talks about how the Palestinian poet Morud Barghouti writes that if you want to dispossess a people, the simplest way to do it is to tell their story and to start with secondly. Start the story with the arrows of the Native Americans and not with the arrival of the British, and you will have an entirely different story. Start the story with the failure of the African state, but not with the colonial creation of the African state, and you have an entirely different story. Adichie's words have stayed with me. While on a service learning trip to Seattle, I visited Inscape, a former immigration and naturalization service building. The team invited me and my peers to take a tour, prefacing it by describing it as a place that has historically held so much pain, but it is reclaimed by transformation into a safe haven for displaced artists, serving as a place of healing, one that was nurturing and housed organizations that provide resources for immigrants and their communities. I heard these words and I thought I understood, but I wasn't prepared for what I'd experience next. 5 floors detailing firsthand accounts of detainment, of the uncertainty of being held indefinitely. Walking into a hallway that formerly led to solitary confinement rooms. Reading about family separation and the conditions in which detainees were booked and treated as less than. I wasn't prepared for the writing on the courtyard walls from detainees, the only mark of their existence since they had not belonged anywhere but were stuck in the ether, stateless between the US and their country of origin because of red tape and repatriation standstills. In the main entryway, 72 jumpsuits greeted you. For the 72 years this building was in operation from 1932 to 2004, and on them, written in the same handwriting as the tar on the courtyard, were quotes showcasing the psychological toll and anxiety grappling migrants. Some were refugees, some passed through for a mistake on their visa, some stayed for decades awaiting their fate. This installation, called Freedom and Dignity Over Fear, honors the voices of immigrants, detainees, and prisoners of Japanese American incarceration in this building because of the many ways the system had failed them and stripped away their autonomy, their power to tell their own story. Who tells your story has power. Their story was labeled as one of criminality. Borders exist as messages of political design for an agenda that deems one group as in while othering the rest. Sovereignty maintains the established pecking order where if someone is on top, others must take the place below. This national identity is a sense of comfort, a pretense, an impalpable notion that those in power clutch onto as they view the world from their glass castles. Physical boundaries make the abstract concept of sovereignty tangible by having something to protect and uphold, however, at the expense of a complex, shared humanity. Before someone is of a nation, they are human first. The national legislature should reflect this understanding. Migration predates manifest destiny and the American dream. Since the dawn of humanity, the flow and movement of peoples has occurred. We've lost sight of migration as a natural process, one that is more natural than borders. Although nations tout security and civic pride to justify their agenda, the topic of migration is often a discussion of self-preservation and assimilation, while fearing change and transformation, fearing what is unknown and different, but may shake up the status quo, where they maintain the power to control which stories are told. Hysteria and ignorance are not platforms in which decisions should be made. Fear is a crumbling block that erodes itself from within. Fear is a powerful motivator, yet a brilliant deceiver, a storyteller originating in falsehood. Migration is a multifaceted, dynamic process that calls for a multifaceted, dynamic solution. Regulating this issue to a single identity and a single story bears the consequence of reducing an undeniable history of entanglement for cultural development and societal progress. National security and protecting innate human dignity are complementary objectives of migration law. Two sides of the same coin that, when balanced and dynamically engaged, will reflect the shared humanity that binds us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Darina. And next we have Rebecca Haile.
Shut up and dribble. Those 4 words spoken by Laura Ingraham, a Fox correspondent in 2018, weren't just directed at one man. They were aimed at an entire generation of Black voices refusing to stay silent. The target was a 4-time NBA champion, multiple-time All-Star, and one of the most recognizable athletes in the world, LeBron James. But most importantly, he's a part of a lineage of Black public figures who have used their platforms to speak on injustice. From wearing I Can't Breathe shirts after the killing of Eric Garner in 2014 to supporting the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, LeBron was shown that visibility can be used as a tool for weakness, resistance, and a community building. At first glance, Social media seems to amplify that power. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter give Black creators unprecedented reach. Voices that were once marginalized can now shape global conversations in real time. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Visibility is not the same as control. We live in what scholars call an attention economy, a system where engagement, clicks, and virality determine value. According to the academic concept of neoliberalism, success is tied to market performance, not moral clarity. In other words, what spreads is not always what is right. It is what's profitable. And what's profitable? Often it's trauma, controversy, cultural expression rooted in Black identity, but stripped of ownership. A 2021 report by the Center of Critical Race and Digital Studies found that Black creators drive many of the most viral trends online, yet are less likely to receive financial compensation or attribution compared to their non-Black counterparts. Similarly, the Pew Research Center highlights how algorithms prioritize engagement over equity, reinforcing systems where platforms benefit more than creators. So we have to ask, who's really benefiting? Let's return to LeBron. In 2026, when asked about visiting Israel, he responded, "I've heard great things." On the surface, it seems like a harmless comment, but context matters at a time when human rights organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch were documenting violence and displacement, where reports of 73,182 people and counting people have died in Gaza. Silence or neutrality carries weight. This is where the tension lies. Black public figures are often expected to speak on domestic racial injustice, and many do so powerfully, but when issues extend past national borders, especially into geopolitical issues, their messaging can shift, soften, or disappear entirely. Why? Because social media platforms and the corporate structures behind them reward safety. They reward neutrality. They reward statements that maintain brand partnerships and global appeal. Authenticity becomes risky, and that's the core issue. Digital visibility gives the illusion of power, while systems of monetization quietly limit it. So, how can creators maintain authenticity and agency? First, by grounding themselves in values, not trends. Speaking only when it is comfortable or profitable is not authenticity, that is strategy. Second, by building ownership outside of platforms. True agency comes from controlling your narrative through independent media, community networks, and direct audience relationships. And finally, by recognizing that visibility alone is not liberation. Being seen is not the same as being heard, and being heard is not the same as being valued. We have to be critical consumers of the content we engage with. Not every viral moment is truth. Not every influential voice is acting in the best interest of communities that they represent. Because in a system designed to monetize attention, even the most important and powerful voices can be shaped subtly, quietly by what the system rewards. So I leave you with this. If platforms profit from Black expression, but Black creators lack control, then visibility is not empowerment, it is exploitation. And until ownership, accountability, and authenticity align, the question remains, who truly benefits? Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. And next we have Brian Kazidunka.
Y'all can hear me okay? All right, perfect. Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Kazanduka. Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Kazanduka, and I wrote this speech using ChatGPT. Don't worry, not this specific speech, but a speech I gave a year ago for one of my classes. The topic wasn't personal, it was academic. And as long as it sounded like I knew what I was talking about, seemed like a normal thing to do. But notice that key difference in how you viewed me for using ChatGPT for my speech when I said it was an academic presentation or not too personal. It's because we don't want to feel like we're just hearing from a human robot, but when Because we don't want to feel like we're just hearing from a human robot but when all we nearly need is the information, who cares? Now imagine we're dealing with a more personal type of writing, one that seeks to capture the emotions we just can't seem to articulate and deliver them in a lasting and memorable way. I'm, of course, talking about the rise of AI music that is becoming more and more popular with each passing day. In 2026, there are a plethora of music apps that you can find. In 2026, there are a plethora of music apps that you can find with capabilities for experienced users or casual users like you or me. You could be a sound engineer, delivering a mix that would usually take days to complete in only a matter of minutes. Or you could be me in my room late at night, turning a couple of lines from my notes app into a song that I think sounds better than Bryson Tiller. Okay. No matter which boat you fall into, the possibilities are endless, much like the business concerns. You see, in the past year, major record labels like Universal Music Group have made a complete 180 on their AI music stance. These companies went from suing companies like Suno, based right here in Cambridge, to signing strategic licensing agreements that basically give them the green light to do whatever they want with the music. You see, the question at the heart of the matter is simple. Where does this leave the musicians? And when I say, where does this leave the musicians, I want to specifically talk about Black musicians. Record labels have historically exploited their Black artists financially and artistically. Record labels have historically exploited their Black artists both financially and artistically. So even if, record labels have historically exploited their Black artists both financially and artistically. So the AI era could be the final frontier in an attempt to rid Black music of the Black experience that informs it. To finally capture our rhythm without our voice. As a songwriter and AI major, I must say that I'm really optimistic about these AI music tools. By lowering the barrier of entry to music, they can inspire a whole new generation. They can inspire a whole new generation to follow creative impulses they would have otherwise kept hidden. Nevertheless, the concerns of AI music, misappropriation in AI music, are serious and need to be dealt with seriously. There are two primary concerns we have when it comes to misappropriation: economic and creative. The creative concerns for artists lies in how their sonic likeness is being used or reproduced by AI. We all remember the legendary Kendrick vs. Drake rap battle of 2024, which left Not Like Us stuck in our heads for the entire song. But a song that many overlooked from that time was Drake's Tailor-Made Freestyle, which received a cease and desist letter from the Tupac Shakur estate for using AI clones of his and Snoop Dogg's voice plus health. This moment prompted serious debate over the legality of AI voice. Some supporters of Drake argued that he was merely taking inspiration from their sounds, while detractors noted Tupac's lack of agency in the matter. Think of it. The man who had been deceased for over 30 years was appearing on a song he'd never even heard, rapping words he never uttered a day in his life. This is complicated even further by the economic considerations. We might believe that if Drake used Tupac's AI voice, then his estate would be entitled to some form of compensation. But where the waters get truly murky is when it comes to artists receiving compensation when AI models train on their music. I'm going to jump ahead to my conclusion in that there is a man named Dawood Leonard, Northeastern alumni, whose company CreateSafe is aiming to empower artists to manage and monetize their intellectual property. With tools like a personalized chatbot and artist image, and an AI voice clone that the artist can license and profit from. CreateSafe is aiming to reclaim agency for a community who's felt to slip away the past few years. You can't allow AI agents to rob us of our agency. Change is inevitable, and we can accept the things we cannot change. But like God would have did, we must change things we cannot accept for ourselves, for others, moving from subjects, from architects, future now.
Thank you, Brian. And next we have Dinesli Pierre Compusano.
Hey everyone, I want you all to think back to a time in your life when you saw an injustice and you chose to do nothing. Maybe you were on the train and someone was asking for your help and you looked away. Maybe you saw something occurring here at Northeastern and you told yourself, that's Northeastern's problem, not mine. I had a moment like this too recently where I saw an injustice and I chose to do nothing initially. Oh, you can't hear me. That moment of silence, it taught me something crucial. Neutrality, it's never really neutral. And it becomes the form of complicity when your silence allows injustice to prevail. My own moment of neutrality, as I mentioned, occurred while I was a part of a mentoring organization on campus, whose work with Black youth, it really did resonate with me. Although the demographics of my fellow co-mentors, it caught my eye instantly, and not in a good way. As a Boston native, I was far too familiar with the discrepancies between public and private education funding. And it seemed as though this organization would help bridge the gap between this discrepancy and help Boston kids who grew up just like me. Unfortunately, I gradually grew increasingly aware of how contradictory the organization was, even with its good intentions. Despite holding weekly DEI meetings and having multiple social justice awards, I was one of only a handful of Black students in an organization with over 100 people. 100 people. However, seeing this discrepancy, I did nothing initially. I stayed a mentor for 4 semesters and then I left. So how did my commitment in this organization demonstrate neutrality? Simple. I became a silent accomplice in the organization's underrepresentation of Black mentors. I would vent to my friends about its racial gap and the microaggressions. My venting remained just that, venting. Thus, I demonstrated neutrality, not through my feelings, but through my inaction, leaving the problem for someone else to solve. Is that not a form of complicity? I justified my inaction and my departure with the misconception that it simply was not my problem to solve, that I didn't have enough power to create change, that it was up to the higher ups and the executives and not me. Here's the thing with what I just said. Although it may not have been in the description of the organization to fight for more Black mentors, even so, it became my responsibility the second I noticed and felt the imbalance. As Mamie Till stated in 1968, whatever happens to any of us anywhere in the world had better be the business of us all. Hence, so how should we evaluate responsibility? In a society where it's significantly easier to diffuse that blame onto executives, onto higher ups, we should assess whether or not an individual has chosen accountability over silence. My departure from this organization, it taught me that passivity can help sustain the habitual exclusion of Black students in seemingly woke environments. I felt a lot of guilt when I left this organization, but that guilt, it soon turned into accountability. I wrote an email calling for more Black mentors, and I helped organize a meeting that would help find ways to recruit Black students on campus that was non-tokenized and meaningful. We must render ourselves responsible for the change that we want, no longer forfeiting that responsibility to the higher ups, because we all see what happens when we do that. Nothing changes. Evaluating responsibility, it's not about sitting silent. It's about finding a way that your silence can turn into a voice. The next time you see an injustice on campus or anywhere in the world, will you resort to neutrality, or will you finally do something like I did? Thank you.
And our next speaker is Daniel Ratteau.
I ask you all to ask yourself this: what does it mean to be excellent? Is it the straight A's on a report card, the trophy on the shelf, the scholarship offer in your inbox? Or is it something else perhaps? Something quieter even. Could be how you conquer life's tribulations, deal with the cards that you are dealt with, or the resilience you rebuild after every setback. Is it the pride you carry within your community by just showing up? For many Black students across this country, excellence is not simply a goal. It is a requirement, a shield, a great barrier, a performance that never gets to end. It is our life's mission. From the moment we walk into a classroom, a boardroom, or a competition stage that I'm speaking to you from right here, there is an unspoken test running beneath the surface that we both know exists amongst multiple worlds and populations. Not solely being asked, can you do this? But can you do this well enough to make others stop doubting you? Well enough to represent your family, your community, your culture? Well enough to prove the stereotype that are being perpetuated against us time and time again? Because here's the truth no one puts on any kind of motivational poster. Excellence, when it becomes obligation, stops feeling like empowerment. It starts feeling like survival, which is something the Black community, in my opinion, has been deeply accustomed to. I want you to imagine carrying a backpack. Inside said backpack is everything you've been told you need to succeed in life, which may include your grades, your reputation, your composure, your professionalism, your ability to make others comfortable within your presence. Now imagine that backpack never comes off. Not at a dinner, not on weekends, not even when you are grieving or sick or simply tired. That is what it feels like to live under the weight of extraordinary expectations with no infrastructure to hold you up. We have been taught to be strong for so long, we forgot that strength has limits, and that those limits may be applicable to us as well in terms of the mental, physical, and cultural. As an ambitious individual myself, I am not here to tell you to lower your ambitions, not even close. I believe in excellence. I believe in the spark that lights the fire that lives in communities that have had to fight for every seat at every table. I believe in the students who stay up late, not because someone is forcing them, but because they genuinely love what they are doing and will love what they are learning. But I am also asking us to make a critical distinction. There is a difference between inspiring excellence and demanding it as the price of our belonging. One lifts our community, while in my opinion, the other crushes it. So you make yourselves, and you may ask yourselves in that process, what is one to do? First, we tell the truth. We as people, we as Black individuals of this community, we must realize that we deserve rest. We must stop acting like us doing anything and everything makes us superior when being burnt out is the only avenue. No, struggling does not make us failures, and our worth is not equivalent to our performance in this life. Second, our institutions beyond Northeastern must build real support systems. Mentorship programs, perhaps that go beyond academic advising, counseling services that are culturally competent and staffed by people who understand the specific layered experience of being Black in spaces that were not always built for you, like that of the John D. O'Brien African American Institute. Safe spaces where a student can express that they are in fact not okay without fearing that it'll be used against them. And third, we must redefine what excellence looks like. Excellence is not perfection. It is not the absence of struggle. Excellence is showing up with full authenticity while honoring both your ambition and your humanity. It means knowing when to push forward and having the wisdom to know when to pause and take a break. We ask so much of our young Black students. I'm sure you've all been asked for a lot. And yet they rise again and again with breathtaking grace. But grace should not be confused with invincibility. Behind every high-achieving student is a full human being who deserves support, safety, and the freedom to sometimes just be. So the next time you see a Black student achieving something remarkable, celebrate them truthfully and with a genuine, warm embrace. And then ask, what are we doing to make sure they're okay? Because the goal was never just to produce greatness, which I'm sure you are all very capable of, but the goal was always to sustain it. Thank you.
And next we have Renee Robinson Omolade.
Here's a tune about this honey named Renee that I met one day. Now, I'm not gonna rap for y'all, but my mom made sure that I knew hip hop, and it became a source of healing and empowerment along my journey. My name is Renee Omolade. I'm a mother, a partner, a daughter, a sociologist, and dare I say, excellent. Your crown has already been paid for. All you must do is put it on. That radical declaration by James Baldwin challenges us to stand firm in our inherent worth. But in a world that demands Black excellence as a prerequisite for safety and credibility, we have to ask, what is excellence? Were we born with it or do we earn it? Who gets to define it and at what cost to our well-being? I grew up in Castle Square projects where excellence was defined by hood politics like, can you throw hands? Then I went to Boston Latin School where excellence meant academic rigor, code switching, and learning to belong in a place that wasn't meant for me. In college, I learned to build relationships.
Calvin.
Oh, Calvin.
Calvin.
Oh, somebody's came off mute. Yeah. No, it's okay. All right. Well, while we're having a little intermission, my kids are here. Hey, kids. And my mom and my boyfriend. I can start from the beginning. It's okay. Right. Here's a tune about this honey named Renee that I met one day. Now, I'm not gonna rap for y'all, but my mom made sure that I knew hip hop, and it became a source of healing and empowerment along my journey. My name is Renee Omolade. I am a mother, a partner, a daughter, an educational equity leader, sociologist, and dare I say, excellent. Your crown has already been paid for. All you have to do is put it on. That radical declaration by James Baldwin challenges us to stand firm in our inherent worth. But in a world that demands Black excellence as a prerequisite for safety and credibility, we have to ask ourselves, what is excellence? Were we born with it, or do we earn it? Who gets to define it, and at what cost to our well-being? I grew up in Castle Square projects where excellence was defined by hood politics like, can you throw hands? Then I entered the halls of Boston Latin School where excellence meant academic rigor, code switching, and learning to belong in a place that was not meant for me. In college, I learned to build relationships with people who didn't look like me, navigating W.E.B. Du Bois' double consciousness, just to prove I deserved a seat at the table. But the most profound lessons came from church, where I was reminded that my excellence was not a performance, it was a gift. And my grandmother, who always said that our ancestors didn't enter the middle passage because of their weakness, they were selected because of their strength. And yet in America, the standard of exceptionalism is too often built on economic prosperity. In Greater Boston, the median net worth of a Black family is $8. For a white family, it's $250,000. For Black students, this gap creates a relentless pressure of needing to be twice as good to be equal. We often carry the weight of closing gaps that are systematically widened every time we try. And I have found that pressure to always be good enough leads to burnout if I forget what Maya Angelou already knew. Phenomenally, phenomenal woman, that's me. We raise the bar every time we walk into a room, and the data proves it. McKinley found that racially diverse companies are 36% more likely to outperform their competitors financially. So we don't just raise the bar when we walk in the room, we raise the bottom line. And yet we are too often left scraping from the bottom of an empty well to keep going. Burnout is not a badge of honor. And for Black students, especially, the cost of excellence too often includes anxiety, isolation, and the quiet grief of never feeling like enough. Excellence, though, has never been one-dimensional. Madam C.J. Walker was exceptional, overcoming an abusive marriage to build a hair care empire in the early 1900s and become the first Black female millionaire. My great-grandmother, Benona Bradford, was an exceptional leader in the New York NAACP, daring to seek political power at a time when Black women were expected to stay invisible. From them and so many sung and unsung heroes, we learned that we are exceptional because we persist, but we are sacred because we exist. So what do we do with that? For institutions, you must create spaces like this where Black excellence can be healthy, for not only support services, but also create opportunities for celebration. Educate those with privilege on the brilliance and the burden of Black excellence. Acknowledge your harmful past and put your money where your mouth is with scholarships and opportunities. For individuals, remember who you are innately. Find mentors, code switch, not because you must, but because you may, as a tool, not a mask. And always question exceptionalism and what that means in your sphere. For many Black Americans, true excellence is the persistence to remain whole in a world that tries to break you. I am not excellent because of where I grew up or my degrees. I am excellent because through it all, I keep my crown on. Our excellence is not a debt we owe, it is a harvest we gather. So keep your head up and remember, your crown is paid for. All you have to do is put it on.
And next, I would like to introduce Gabriela Tomas Obarje.
Imagine walking down white sand beaches. You feel the warm sun touch your skin, a feeling you have missed after being detained to a New England winter. The ocean, almost as warm as the sun, washes over your feet, a unique sensation only a Caribbean beach can bring you. To your right, you hear merchants hustling to get handcrafted bracelets, figurines, and clothing sold to eager tourists. Inhale. You smell fried fish coming off the grill to a full table of colorful cultural food. You're on a beachside resort in Puerto Plata, Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic, home to 11.4 million people, home to the highest and to the lowest point in the Caribbean, and most importantly, home to my family. As the daughter of a Dominican, I have come to grow and appreciate the culture, food, and music my country has to offer. And as much as I love my country, there is a serious border issue that many fail to discuss. The Dominican Republic shares the island of Hispaniola with Haiti, and right now, the tensions between the two countries are worsening as we speak. Migrations, borders, and humanity are all at risk. And as a proud Dominican, I am saddened by the state of my country and the government's actions towards Haitian migrants. Borders should reflect a shared humanitarian responsibility, but in this instance, that is not the case. The Dominican Republic has been neglecting human rights for several years now, and it's time to stop. According to the Global Campus of Human Rights, in 2013, a decision was made to overturn birthright citizenship, denationalizing over 200,000 Dominicans who were born in the country but to foreign Haitian parents. This decision worsened the condition for Dominicans of Haitian descent, with as many as 120,000 inhumane deportations. Haitians in the DR live day by day in fear of being stripped from the only country they have ever known and forced to live in a country full of extreme poverty and gang violence. Without citizenship, they lose access to government assistance, education, and the right to work. They live in refugee camps across the nation with no electricity, food, or medical care. I myself saw a glimpse of this when I visited the Dominican Republic in 2023. We were taken to a refugee camp where the bath and drinking water were taken from the same muddy river. Homes were made from tarps that barely held themselves together. And don't get it twisted, just because in the daytime it's warm, at night the DR is frigid. Children use broken plastic water bottles as toys, a distraction from the reality they're facing. Many who have lived in the Dominican Republic their entire lives have been displaced due to discriminatory and unjust law. Being deprived of housing, water, and food and education is not just a border issue. It's a humanitarian issue. Borders provide structure and security, but when they strip people of dignity and identity, they fail their purpose. Resolving this situation in the Dominican Republic begins with a shift in mindset. How do we shift this mindset? That begins with education. The reason Dominicans hold such a distasteful view towards Haitians is due to the horrifying dictatorship they've endured from 1930 to 1961 by Rafael Trujillo. Trujillo terrified citizens, putting an end to anyone who stood in his way. As dictator, he ordered a massacre at the border that killed over 20,000 Haitians. He pushed an ideology towards Dominicans of whitening the state, and since then, the country has never treated anyone of African descent the same. And as someone who wants to heal the world and make it a better place, I have a few suggestions. By improving the education system in the Dominican Republic, citizens can use their education and resources to become well-informed regarding the systemic structures made against Haitians. With proper knowledge, Dominicans can advocate against unlawful deportations, apply pressure in providing citizenship for those who were born in the country, and provide relief for those with little to no resources. I implore you all to explore programs such as 7 Elements and One World of Network Schools, organizations that help improve education and humanitarian efforts in the DR.
When people are stripped from basic human rights, humanitarianism always supersedes sovereignty, and it is up to those with access to the resources to help to support those without. It is up to us to educate ourselves about humanitarian crises, share our wealth of knowledge, and most importantly, advocate for those in need. Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Glenn Johannes.
I'm going to start off with a question. Why is the US the most powerful country in the world? What makes us a leader? We've heard it a million times. We're the most powerful country, so why? It can't be the transit system we have. It can't be our healthcare system. So what is it? And I could stand here and wait, but I'll save you some time and I'll just let you know. In short, it's not minding our business. But let me pause for a second and let me tell you a quick story. So I'm a senior, and last year I got to take a class for health policy and administration that I loved. And for our final presentation, I wanted to make a point about how the US had so many problems that we've all been hearing about tonight, and we could use that money towards ourselves. So to contrast that, I put a figure up of how much the US spends on foreign aid every year, and in 2024, it was $82.3 billion. It was no surprise that when I asked the class to raise their hands if they thought that was too much after all the problems we had discussed, every single hand went up. In Boston, the bluest state, city in the bluest state. And in that moment, I thought that was a job well done. I set up an argument, I gave my facts, I got everyone to agree, and I got a great grade. But I turned that moment over a lot in my head. What I actually did was I handed a room of students a framed number with a context that I edited to match. And I gave them the version that fit my argument. And I've turned it over so often because that is exactly what has been done to all of us, and nowhere more so than in US foreign policy. And when I say not minding our business like earlier, I mean that quite literally, like $82.3 billion worth of literally. From World War II all the way in Europe to Vietnam ending almost 60,000 American lives to Iraq, there's been almost no single major global event where the US was not in the room, whether it's with money, with troops, or even phone calls to their leaders. And here's the contradiction at the foundation of this whole thing. The story we tell the people about this country is that people come here for something better. And for some of them, that's true. But a lot of people didn't come here. They were brought here. They built this country with absolutely no say in any of it. Or maybe they were already here and the land was taken from right underneath them. So from the beginning, even the idea of America as this hopeful immigrant dream was itself a selective edit, like my class story. A misleading kind of framing. But let's focus for a second for the people who did come here voluntarily, whether it was in 2020 or in 30 years ago when my parents left Ethiopia, or 1620 on the Mayflower. They all wanted the same thing, the hope for a better future for themselves and their families. They're not coming here with plans to build a global empire or dreams of spreading democracy or having covert operations in Iran. So from the very beginning, the gap between why people come here and what gets done in their name and their tax dollars is not new. The people want their lives and the leaders want their world, and that gap has never closed. So the first problem the US is that it can't claim that to be the world's moral authority and only show up for the countries worth showing up for. Quick example, in 1994, Rwanda collapsed into genocide with 80,000 people killed in 100 days, which is the population of Boston and Cambridge combined in less than a semester. We did not show up. There's no strategic positioning for us, no reason, so we didn't. We barely gave a statement. In Iraq, 9 years later, we invaded because we heard there was weapons of mass destruction. And we called it liberation too. And that place is still destroyed as we left it. And the difference was not morality, it was interest. So even now, I'm doing the same thing to you that I did to my class. I'm giving you my framing, and I'm calling it facts. And maybe you'd push back if you had time to do research, but at the end of the day, I'm the one on the stage with the microphone, so you're probably just gonna agree with what I tell you. And the people who are making these decisions are definitely counting on that. So here's the second problem. Even when we do admit that there might be hypocrisy, we don't go about it in a morally just way. And the gut reaction, especially right now, is to pull back everything we have. America is first, and we keep our own resources. But what does bringing the money home look like? It means so many medical supply chains wasted, USAID gutted, millions of dollars of medical supplies left and never actually reaching people who need it. A decision made by people who never have to see the consequences. And that is what this framing misses. The US has inserted itself so deeply into the health systems, economies, and governments of so many countries around the world that our absence doesn't just save us money, it leaves vacuums. And we cannot pull out after all this time without serious moral repercussions. So a smarter definition of national interest would look like building the US up through building a more stable world as well. And whatever you feel about putting America first and whatever the future of foreign intervention looks forward, the main takeaway is that you cannot make this call on a snapshot or even my speech. The same way my class shouldn't have, because contextual history is important, and because $82.3 billion sounds like a lot until you learn it's 1.17% of the federal budget. And to me, that seems pretty reasonable for the self-appointed CEO of the world. Thank you.
So now that we've heard from all of our incredible contestants, let's please give them one more round of applause. So while our judges take a few minutes to finalize their scores, it's time for you to make your voices heard. We are now opening voting for the People's Choice Award. Please take a moment to cast your vote for the speech that resonated with you the most tonight. You can do so by scanning the QR code on the screen and completing the survey. Voting will remain open for the next few minutes, so be sure to submit your response before it closes.
All right, y'all. You know, I have the distinct pleasure to filibuster till we get the scores. But I really do want to say that I was truly impressed with you guys. Yes, yes. Let's give them another round of applause because I I have to admit you all have raised the bar, right? We have been doing this a long time, and I'm just glad I ain't a judge because this has got to be one of the hardest judgments to make for this competition because you all did a fantastic job. And primarily because your topics were clearly researched well and you delivered them well. And I want to commend you all because you clearly worked hard on it and did a great job. What I want to encourage you all to do, and this is something that I tell students all the time. You students listen to other students, and I want you all to encourage your colleagues to consider participating next year. Right? You all have raised the bar. Now we can raise the number of contestants, which will inevitably continue to raise the bar. And so, bring a friend. Those of you all in the audience who heard these wonderful speeches and felt like you could do better, make sure you sign up next time and get involved. You know, the availability of information out there is vast, and so you all told some really good. You shared some really good information that I think people will benefit from. A couple of you all mentioned some of the wonderful names in history, and whether you know this or not, several of those names you mentioned have been to the Institute in the past, like the Jesse Jacksons, Maya Angelou's, the James Baldwin's, the I don't know if I heard Alex Haley, but Alex Haley, uh, you know, Sonia Sanchez, all of these folks have been here, passed through the doors of the Institute, and inspired a lot of young people that have been a part of the Institute. And so I know some of y'all didn't know that, but there's a very rich history of some of those people that you all mentioned in the relation to the Institute. And so I appreciate you all mentioning them, but most importantly, building on their history and their legacy is critical. Uh, when you all, this is just a comment. I'm not suggesting that you've done anything wrong. But when you present yourself, make sure the audience knows who you are. I mean, I know y'all probably was like, my name is up there, Doc. Why? But just get in the habit of letting people know who you are, right? And I've made this mistake too. And somebody always was like, Doc, will you tell them who you are? But just make sure that folks know because one of y'all said, I am somebody. Which one of y'all said that? I am somebody, right? Right? I had the pleasure when I was at Howard of meeting Jesse Jackson, right? And he did that I am somebody speech, which we done heard a lot, but it was inspirational. You know what I mean? And so I did walk away feeling like I am somebody. Um, okay, so I always get the distinct pleasure of reading off the winners. So who should how do you want to do this, Denise? Denise looking at me like, Doc, what you looking at me for? well, well, no, the People's Choice, do that one last. People's Choice, okay, I got it. All right. They said it all in one. They said it all in unison. 3, 2, 1, Doc. So, but let's give another round of applause for our judges. Thank you. And Jay, were you doing Italian? Kelly, yeah, let's give them a round of applause. And Keith for keeping us on time, keeping us on time. I know all of y'all was doing what I was doing. Y'all was looking, where's that knocking coming from? Right? A buzzer system, right? You know, and I can't say enough about our wonderful MC and host. Let's give it up for Jayla. She did a fantastic job. And we can't really give enough credit to Dr. Denise Douglas because all of you all know who she is. You all have heard from her. But she is, and I know this isn't her major or anything, but she's an incredible organizer, isn't she? Right? She, yes, fantastic. Thank you. All right. No, right. So with that being said, let's give it up for Quay. Everybody, Quay is. And Greg, let's give it up for Greg too. And let's give a wonderful round of applause for our coaches because they did a fantastic job in helping getting you all ready. All right. Drum roll, please. Coming in third, Mackenzie. Yeah. Wait a second. Right. All right, I'm gonna send that to you right now. Hold on a second. In second place, Felicia. Where's that to this camera? Where's that to this camera? Oh, no, you good? You good? Okay. Good job. Good job. Another drum roll. And first, Renee. I must say, she handled that disruption cool, didn't she? She was. I know, right? I know, right? She had her crown on, right? You know, like shoot. All right. Now the one everybody wants to know, the people's choice. First ever. Gabriella. Congratulations. Okay, group picture. Yep. Okay, so y'all bring them. Okay, yep. I'll say bye first. All right, so listen. Thank you all so much. This has been a wonderful evening. Fantastic. Yeah, yeah. You can stand up and cheer. Yep, yep. There you go. Want to. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I want you all to know that we're gonna give y'all some food on the way out. So make sure that you grab some. But everybody, please take a moment to congratulate the contestants, all the contestants, because in my view, everybody is a winner and everybody's a number one and our people's choice, all that good stuff. So let's give everybody a round of applause. And second, be on the lookout, right? We're gonna have a few things happening. How many of y'all are graduating this year? Oh yeah, okay, good, 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 good. We have our baccalaureate ceremony that we're gonna have in April. That's always a lot of fun and it's exciting. And you can still call it the Black graduation. But it's gonna be in Black men. And because we're doing it in Black men, I mean we try to make sure that families have enough seats and everything, but friends are welcome and so forth. We try to make sure that it's accessible to everybody. So look out for it. Let's give our winners one more round of applause. They did a fantastic job. Okay. Yeah. And finally, please make sure that you guys do the impact survey. You probably saw the billboard out front. There's a QR code on it. Please do it. That helps us in making sure that we are able to not only improve the services, but advocate for those things that you all think are very important for you all to make sure that that support is there. All right. So thanks a lot again, everybody. You all have a wonderful evening. Definitely make sure come up and say hi and thank the judges and all that kind of good stuff. Thank you all so very much and have a good night. All right.
Before all my participants leave, could I just get one group shot on stage, please?
Yeah.